Hey, everybody, welcome back into this room. For me, it's so beautiful because this room keeps getting occupied by more and more and more beautiful people, people that I have no idea existed in the world 10 seconds ago. But suddenly, as strangers, they show up in this room, and every single one of them has proved to be a inspiring, enlightening, interesting, sometimes boring, sometimes happy, sometimes sad. It doesn't really matter. What happens is we have the chance to be here together. My only intention in having this show is to hold space for people to feel loved and accepted, to feel listened to and heard, to feel acknowledged and validated. And what I love seeing is when that happens for people, somewhere along the show, many, many times, who people are not falls away and who they are comes to be. And it's just a beautiful thing that happens when we feel completely, when we trust the person we're with enough to just be ourselves. I have to do my obligation to our sponsor. Our sponsor is the book over my left shoulder. It's the book I wrote. It's called The Mosaic. And they're sponsoring this. The Mosaic is a story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asks the adults where his parents are, they tell him they're in a place called heaven. So the boy that moment sets out in search of the place called heaven. But the people he meets along the road are not the people you would imagine. They're not the clergy and the ministers and the priests and the swamis and the gurus and the motivational leaders of the world. They're the common ordinary people. They're the trash man and the road worker, the homeless man and the blind woman, the waitress and the gardener. And he has to say to himself, what am I meeting these people for? What can they show me about heaven? But he says, I'm here with them. I might as well sit and listen to them tell me their story. And in every case where he listens to them, their story, what he realizes is the person he sees after hearing their story is entirely different than the person he heard before. And when that happens to him over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, he starts to wonder, do I see anything the way it is, or do I see everything through my eyes and see it only as the way I am? I wonder what the world would look like if I could see it the way it is rather than the way I am. And in that moment, he looks to his right and he sees a monk unzipping the sky and inviting him to walk into a parallel reality where he meets the wise one, who's the keeper of the mosaic. If you're interested in that, I invite you to get a copy of it. It's available on Amazon or on my website. All those things will be in the show notes. But it's starting to sound like a monologue rather than a conversation. So I want to thank my sponsors for allowing me now to move from the sponsorship into what we're doing. My guest today is Patrick Ratchford. And Patrick, I want to welcome you into the room. I want to thank you for coming. And I want to tell you what a pleasure it is to meet you. And I'm looking forward to our conversation. Tell us who you are and what you do and what's important to you. You with me?
I'm with you. I don't see you. Now I see you.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
All right. Well, if I can't see you, as long as you can see me, thank you for the warm welcome, Daniel. I am Patrick Ratchford, as you stated, a motivational speaker, sales trainer, life coach. But I think a lot of that is so what. uh, More importantly, I do not define myself by what I do for a living. I, I I refer to myself as the youngest child of Lois and Monroe Ratchford. So that's me in a nutshell. What I do as a profession, the industry that I have chosen to enter, but as an individual, uh, a Renaissance man, if you will. Enjoy absorbing new information. I enjoy meeting new individuals. I enjoy traveling. I enjoy new experiences. So if I had to define who I was, that is how I would explain myself.
I love that. You know, The three easiest words in the world to say are "How are you?" and the two quickest responses are "Fine" and "Great." Um, and
Sure.
often I find when I just ask that question again, and I haven't even asked you how you are, but when we're really interested in knowing how a person is, we've got a lot going on in the world we live in right now. We've got a pandemic going on. We've got a civil rights movement happening. We've got a Me Too movement happening. We've got the erosion of many of the structures that we once believed in, that we counted on and built the foundation of our life upon, don't seem to be holding up so much anymore.
Indeed.
How are how are you doing, Patrick?
Like everyone, I have some apprehension, some anxiety. Uh, Usually, when things have occurred in my life, I have a reference point. Oh, this happened 5 years ago, or this happened 20 years ago, this happened 30 years ago. But because this happened over 100 years ago, I don't have a reference point that I can refer to from my own data bank, if you will.
Yeah,
So that has increased my anxiety, where normally I'm a cool, calm cookie, so to speak, because I've experienced so much in my life that I can usually adapt. But the flip side of that is that I have a consistent meditation practice. I consistently uh, look within and reevaluate myself on a daily basis. So even though we are going through this pandemic, my meditation practice and my self reevaluation, that consistency has enabled me to the best of my ability, remain calm and still look with hope towards the future.
I love that. And I want to invite the listener to participate now in their thoughts and feelings. And I want to ask you something. I knew Patrick practiced the meditation practice without knowing that he practiced the meditation practice because I could feel it in the resonance of his voice. I could feel sometimes you speak to somebody and they're just on the absolute surface and their voice is up here and they're talking like this, but you can feel in his voice there's a peace in his voice. And that peace comes when people practice. It doesn't have to be meditation. They can have a prayer life. They can have something, but
Yes.
when they're in contact with something bigger than themselves, you can feel it through the resonance of their voice. And so I want to thank you for the practice that you do because it brings peace into this world. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you as well.
Absolutely. Patrick, what makes you happy?
What makes me happy? When my dog lays its head on my leg, when the dragonflies fly above the pond in my backyard, um, reading a good book, a movie that makes me smile, makes me sad, stirs butterflies, uh, great conversations by phone, by video, um, Zoom here lately, and um, just anything that stirs my emotions, I would say,
Yeah.
makes me happy.
And for those of you who have been listening to a lot of these shows or several of these shows, I just want to point out how often I ask that question and how rarely I get a big house, a big job, a beautiful car. And you would think we spend our life so much in search of this happiness and we run after the things that we think will make us happy, but nobody that I talk to in this room says those things are the answers. They say something sort of like Patrick has said, or their version of what Patrick has said. And I've been waiting for someone to say, I get happy when I get, that car that I've always wanted, I want it. But nobody said it. And it's just it's sort of astonishing to me that the world moves in such a direction, but nobody when you ask them flat out that at least in this room, and it might just be the people that the population that's drawn to these conversations, they don't seem to respond that way. Why do you think that is? I mean, you're a motivational person. You talk to people a lot. Why do you think people there's this persona of I'll be happy if I have that. Yet that isn't really what makes us happy.
This is true. I think a lot of it has to do with the conditioning of what we see in movies, the conditioning of what we see and observe through television commercials and advertising on social media, that's the perception that this product, this item will make you happy. But at our core, which you have experienced through your interviews and life experiences, at our core, our happiness comes from a different state. Our happiness comes from a different dimension. Our satisfaction level is attained and achieved in a totally different medium than XYZ product or XYZ service. It's relationships, it's conversations, it's experiences, not a product, not a service.
So you're telling me it's not the soap that I put into my washing machine that's going to make me happy. Is that what I mean, but hear how comical it is. I mean, I said it purposely because of how comical it is, because that's what we hear on television.
Yes.
And I don't know about you, but the experience I have with a lot of people in the world is they don't know themselves very well. They haven't spent the time to go inside themselves. And they're almost scared to do that. Do you encounter that too, or is it just a phenomenon of my life?
No, absolutely. On a consistent basis. Sometimes it's on a one-on-one basis if I'm doing some type of life coaching. Oftentimes, if I'm in a group, which here lately has been digitally versus in person, but on a consistent basis, sadly to say that it's folks are more shallow. They don't want to peel back a layer of their real selves, and so that's my job, not as a profession, but as a human being, to try to be as real as possible, as often as possible, because it makes me feel better, but also gives me an opportunity to let an individual be themselves, if not just for one moment or two.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think we don't do that?
As optimistic as I am, Daniel, the world is quite an eclectic place, right? It's not just rainbows and waterfalls and sunsets. It's also tsunamis and tornadoes and hurricanes and volcanoes.
Yeah,
Um, so I think because we have that balance in the world and in society, that a lot of us since childhood have built a force field, if you will, to try to protect our core, to try to protect our emotions. And so we don't often want to put our shields down to release that force field and show our true selves because we don't want to be disappointed. We don't want to expose ourselves to negativity. We don't want to expose ourselves to pain. We don't want to expose ourselves to extra anxiety. So
yeah.
I think it starts from there.
Again, I want to invite the listener into answering this same question. Do you have a force field up? If you don't, you're probably not human. But what is your force field? Why do you keep it up? What pain are you trying to avoid? How is that force field keeping you isolated and alone in the most connected time the world's ever known? Is it making you happy to hold this force field up? What would it take for you to be vulnerable and allow others, somebody else to come in? What would it take for you to be vulnerable to your own self? I find I'm interested. I ask long questions, which are really short questions, but the preamble of it is a long. I'm sorry.
That's
Um,
fine.
I find I'm less concerned about being hurt by you and more concerned about the self talk that I say in my own head. And over the years, that self talk has gotten less and less, thank God, and more positive. But
Good.
if I were to look at my life and think about it, there's so many times I sabotage myself by the thoughts of, you can't do that. Who are you? You're not good enough to be able to do that. And so after hitting myself so often, I end up putting up something to block myself from being hit because I don't want to get hit. I don't want that
Sure.
pain. But it isn't your punch that I'm blocking, it's mine. And because
Ah,
my punch is so close to my face. Look how far away I am here.
yes,
And
yes.
and I don't know if I'm going to hit myself in my face, in my gut, in my groin, or my legs. So I create a silo that I live in, which is about 2 millimeters away from my body.
Okay,
And then we wonder why I wonder why I don't feel connected to people. Because even in the best connections, my wall's just meeting your wall. And
indeed.
what I found is the simple solution to taking down my silo is, if I stop hitting myself, I don't need a wall to protect myself from myself, right? So
Yes,
if I can be kind to myself, then I don't have to have a wall up. If I can be kind to you, you don't need to have a wall up to me. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I like the fact that you took personal responsibility, saying that you were protecting yourself from yourself versus from an outside source.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's truly the beginning of enlightenment to take personal responsibility and to seek improvement from within versus from without or from outside or from others. So I like that perspective, and I would agree.
Fabulous. In my book, The Mosaic, one of the characters that I love is the gardener. And Mo smells the garden of this gardener from miles away. And it's evening when he first smells it, and he thinks, I'm just going to run to that garden and see it. But he realizes it's evening, he won't be able to see it. So he goes to sleep where he is and wants to enjoy the aroma of the garden when he wakes up and have it draw him to the garden. And in the morning, thank God, the aroma is still there, and he draws him right to the garden. And he comes into this garden. It's the most beautiful garden he's ever seen. And it's so lush and so beautiful, and so many senses are awakened in him that he can't deal with it all. So he closes his eyes and sits and just feels it. And within a moment, he feels a presence 2 inches away from his face. And he opens his eyes and he sees this man standing there right in front of him, and he says, "Who are you?" And it's the gardener. The gardener says, "I know who I am. I'm the gardener of this garden. The question is, who are you?" And he said, "Oh my God, I'm so happy to meet you. I smelled this aroma of your garden. This is the most beautiful garden I've ever seen. I was hoping that I would have a chance to meet you. What have you done to make this garden so beautiful?" And the gardener says, anybody knows that if you put certain colors together, they make each other more beautiful. And Mo says, "I know that. Every gardener knows that, and every gardener does that." The gardener says, "Well, maybe it's the variation of heights. I put small plants in front of taller plants, and taller plants in front of, and behind even taller plants." And Mo says, "No, everybody does that. I know that. There's something about your garden." And the gardener says to him, "Huh? Do you garden?" And he said, "Well, I'm traveling now, so I don't garden much, but occasionally when I stay with people, I'll help them by weeding." And he goes, "Great, good. When you weed, when you pull out that clump of weeds and it breaks in your hands, what do you do?" And Mo says, "Well, I'm just traveling through, so I level it off so that it looks nice, and I go on and continue to weed." And the gardener says, "Maybe what you see in the garden that makes it beautiful is what you don't see. Because when I come to a clump of weeds, I don't just level it off. I go down and I take it out from its roots. Because here's the thing, Mo. When you have weeds in your garden and someone calls you on those weeds, you respond and you react and you defend. But when you have no weeds in your garden and they call you on the weeds, there's nothing to defend. You just say, 'Tell me what you see. I would love to know where you see those things because I would love to pull them out.'" Right?
Nicely said. Nicely said. Yes.
So I found through the gardener in my book that what you say to me has no power versus what I say to myself, unless what you say to me is a place that I haven't taken care of within myself.
Very good.
Make
Very good
sense?
indeed. Yes, absolutely.
And so I wonder why people, again, don't have the courage to go into their own garden and clear it up. Not because they're scared of being hurt by another person, just because they're tired of hurting themselves.
Indeed. Um, it takes a certain amount of courage uh, to look within and to act, um, to take a step forward in any type of self improvement. In some opinions, it's truly the last frontier. Uh, so many of us want to focus on improving technology or improving our yard or upgrading our car or our home or uh, being promoted in our job or growing our business. But very few want to adapt that same dedication, that same vigor, that same burning desire to their own personal development.
Right. It's almost when we hear ourselves speak it, it's almost like why would we upgrade everything around us and not upgrade ourselves?
Yes.
Right? It doesn't like make rational sense. I mean, unless I'm missing something.
We're on the same page
Okay.
unequivocally.
Okay. Thank you for enjoying my craziness with me for a few minutes. Uh,
Oh, goodness.
what's important to you?
Happiness and the pursuit of happiness. I say both because happiness being, I try to focus on the present moment. I try to experience the present moment. Yes, I respect the past. Yes, I look forward to the future, but I am intent on embracing the present as best I can. And then that next step is to pursue happiness by, if I know what makes me happy, I try to include that in my life as often as possible. If I know a certain experience brings me happiness, I try to experience that as much as possible. So if there's a two-part answer is to be happy, the second part is to pursue that happiness. Sometimes I pursue that happiness by traveling. Sometimes I pursue that happiness in relationships. I pursue that happiness in stimulating conversations. I pursue that happiness by reading a great book or watching a great movie.
Yeah. Can I ask you about that a little bit?
Absolutely.
What if we didn't need to pursue happiness? What if happiness was right in front of us and all we needed to do was receive it?
I am familiar with that line of thought, and I see it from both sides. One, because at a certain level, could we meditate or pray or just simply be silent under a tree and feel the wind, the breeze through our hair, an ant crawling across our leg, or a leaf landing on our lap? Could we embrace that experience, that moment, and say we are happy? Yes. Then on the flip side of that coin, sailing across the ocean in a boat or a ship or a canoe, by walking through the forest or walking your dog or walking hand in hand with a loved one, that is happiness as well. Uh, so I see the benefits of both perceptions of not
Yeah.
having to go and seek or pursue that happiness, but I also see the benefits when there's a time and place for that as
I
well.
love that. I love that. Some of the reason why I asked the question is some of the unhappiest, most unhappy people I see are caught in the pursuit of happiness.
Okay.
because they're always, as soon as they get the thing they're pursuing, they want the next thing that's pursued after that. So as soon as they get the raise, they want 10% more than the raise. As soon as they get the car and they have it for a little while, they want the next model up. As soon as they get the
Sure.
house, they want the next model or the next place, or they want to be nomads, or they want, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
And
certainly.
sometimes the pursuit of happiness that I've seen, and I love the way you're describing it. So this isn't a challenge. This is just to get clarity.
Okay.
Um, is that pursuit of happiness sometimes looks like the carrot at the end of a stick on a string, which is always one step away from where we actually are. And I guess my question really is, what if we knew that happiness wanted us 1,000 times more than we want it? What if that job we want wants us to be in that job 1,000 times more than we want that job? And what if we would just get out of the way and allow the things that are ours to come to us that would truly make us happy? That's really the question I was trying to ask. Your thoughts?
The first thought that comes to mind, Danielle, and I don't know where I picked it up in my experience of life, but I used to say that last night I dreamed. I dreamed that I was a butterfly. And then when I awoke, I thought, well, maybe I was a I'm a butterfly dreaming that I'm a man.
Yes.
So if we can realize that what we want to experience, what we want to, what we fervently desires us equally as much. Again, that goes into the world of enlightenment. I think that would propel us, not just as individuals, but as a species, as a race, uh, uh, exponentially for the betterment of our families, our neighborhoods, our cities, our states, our countries, our world. If all of us could embrace that. Uh, Now, it's easier said than actually done, but I think conversations like this and having that ripple effect, it's certainly possible. It certainly is achievable. I think what is it that they did that study on the island about the monkeys? There's a certain amount of monkeys that have to observe another monkey washing a coconut, and what that number is, whether it's 100 or 500 or 2,000. But once a certain amount observe that monkey doing something, then the whole island of monkeys is washing coconuts.
Yes.
So I think as a species, as a race, a human race, um, once folks observe other folks thinking outside the box, challenging themselves internally, embracing happiness, and letting it come naturally, I think it will have a ripple effect for the betterment of all.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a joke they tell of about a man who dies and goes to heaven, and he's met by some saint up in heaven who is the patron saint of the tour of heaven. And he walks him through heaven to show him where he's going to be for the rest of eternity. And he takes him to the heavenly junkyard, and he walks him through all the things that God wanted to give to people on earth, and they denied. And as he's walking with him, he says, the guy who just arrived there says, "Who in the world would turn down this car? This is the most beautiful car I've ever seen. Who would ever turn this down?" And the tour guide says, "Funny enough, that person was you." And he said, "But that's impossible. I would have never turned this car down. This is the car of my dreams." And he said, "Yeah, that's what we thought. That's why we had it here for you. That's why we were offering it to you. But every time you talked to us, you wanted a Volkswagen. And we were trying to give you this beautiful car, and you kept saying, 'I want a Volkswagen, I want a Volkswagen, I want a Volkswagen.' And we couldn't give you this car because we wanted to give you what you wanted, which was a Volkswagen. So it's here in the heavenly junkyard." So often I think that when we pursue what it is we want, we often lose the opportunity to have what it is we really want. Just, I don't mean to belabor the point, but I,
with you.
I like the idea of 200 monkeys
Uh,
because maybe through the course of this, we can understand that if we tried a little less hard and we just received a little more, everything we would want would be given to us in spades.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay. Let's change this a little bit. Let's go into a lightning round, of which I suck at, by the way. Okay.
Okay.
I'm too curious to do a good lightning round, but I still like to do it. Are you a dog person or a cat person? You already told me, I think, but
Yes, I'm a dog person.
okay. Coffee or tea?
I mean, I enjoy both. I don't want to, waffle there, but I'm a huge green tea fanatic, and I have chamomile during the evening. But in the morning, I like black coffee, and sometimes during the afternoon, depending on what projects I have going on. So I have uh, an equal respect for both.
I love that. Are you not necessarily in the way you vote, but in the way you live your life? Would you say you're more conservative or more liberal?
Well, because you brought up voting, it would be independent. I there are parts on both sides that are a part of me. Um, they say that you're liberal when you're up and coming, and you become more conservative once you've achieved a certain level of
Yes,
satisfaction in life. So that's why that there are pluses and minuses to both sides.
I understand. Beautiful. Have you always felt like you fit into the world, or do you feel like you've always been a little bit different?
That's a double-edged sword. Because of my profession, I try or strive to adapt to every environment, to every scenario. But as a child, I always felt, because I was very introspective, I felt different. But I learned to adapt to multiple scenarios, one, because of the challenge, and secondly, because of the profession that I have chosen. Uh, so in my younger years, I would say, or more in my developmental years, I was more um, viewed myself as an outsider. But because of the profession I'm in, I adapt, and so I blend more. If that makes any sense, Daniel.
So, if you weren't doing your profession, what would you feel? Do you feel like you fit in general to the world, or do you feel different?
It's interesting. I Before this pandemic, I spent a lot of time traveling throughout Asia, right, and spent some time with monks. And there's a part of me that I could sit in a monastery or a temple in a robe and just meditate
Yeah,
and have great conversations. And there's another part of me that likes walking through the mall and people watching and enjoying a good movie and having conversations on a bench overlooking the ocean or playing speed chess at the mall. So I can embrace both sides. I think that there will be a certain point that I would eventually want to step out of the monastery and step away from meditation and step into the world. And then there's a part of me that wants to step away from the world and be more introspective and be more self-involved, not on an egotistical way or selfish way, but
yeah,
self-involved when it comes to improvement,
yeah.
both of my body, mind, spiritual side, social side, whatever label that you want to apply. So I would say it's a combination of the two.
I love that. And having spent 10 years in a monastery as a monk, I understand exactly what you're
Oh,
talking about.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I like that. And that I like that answer because it's not something I've normally gotten. Most of the people I talk to say they feel different in the world. And it always interests me because I think most people are trying to fit into a world. But
Mm,
I often now recall, like in the last few days, I've been thinking about the brilliance of Steve Jobs with what he created with Apple.
indeed.
These are for the people who feel different. These are for the ones that don't settle, right? And I thought when I first heard
Yes,
it, what a challenging, what a why would he do that? Because it's but then why he did it is because so many people actually relate to it
yes,
and feel that way. And he created his whole brand around those people who, even though Samsung might be creating a better product, they're not going to leave Apple,
absolutely.
right?
No, I'm
Because
glad that you brought that up. Sometimes when I'm having a conversation with my brother and we're talking about something, I tell him, let's make a dent in the universe. And
yes,
that's another line from Steve Jobs. So, but not to cut you off, but that popped into my
no,
head.
no, beautiful. What are you most scared of?
Late in life, of course, I would love to say I'm going to live 10,000 years, right? But in the event that I'm a few hundred years off, uh, I don't want to be in a position late in life saying, I wish I should have experienced this. I wish I should have done that. And that's how come on a daily basis, I ask myself, what made you happy? What made you sad? What made you smile? What did you achieve? What could you have done better? What do you want to do tomorrow? Not because I want that to be wrote in my life, but because I don't want to encounter that late in life. So I start now, right? They say if you have a fear, you simply identify what that fear is, and then you do everything within your ability to prevent that from occurring, right? I
Yeah,
think there was someone that shared this with me, and tell me if you've heard it, that this individual went to a psychic and asked, I just need to know one thing. And the psychic said, what? So I just want to know where I'm going to die. And the psychic said, why? Because then I just simply won't go there.
right.
So
I love it.
my so my greatest fear is I don't want to be late in my life sitting on my couch or heaven forbid some hospital bed, but reflecting upon my life saying, why didn't I pursue this relationship or this business or this experience? So I avoid that occurrence by on a daily basis asking myself, what did we do today? What did we achieve today? What did we not do? How do we plan to achieve it tomorrow from the goal side? And then on the introspective side, I ask myself, what made you laugh today? What made you cry? What made you sad? What gave you anxiety? What stirred your butterflies? Uh, so if I had a fear, I don't want to look back and say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that, Patrick? And because of my training and the profession that I've chosen, and because I drank my own Kool-Aid, I, on a daily basis, prevent that from occurring by every single day asking myself, what is it that you want to experience? And reevaluating. Now, I've been
Beautiful.
pursuing this same goal for the last 5, 10, 15 years. Sometimes no, a goal may change by the day. What
Yeah,
interested you yesterday may not interest you today. And that's not saying that you're wishy-washy. I think any intelligent being, if you receive new information, it's imperative that you reevaluate.
yeah. I love that. I want to invite the listener to be a part of this now and just ask them, how much are you doing that in your life? How much are you, whether it's because of the fear of missing out of what you could have done if you would have done what you did, and at the end of your days, it just isn't there and you wish you would have taken some time to do that, or just because you've gotten lazy and comfortable and just aren't looking anymore at what new things you could do to give yourself vitality and happiness in life. Interesting questions to ponder and interesting things to see what the results of those questions might bring. What are you most excited about, Patrick?
Most excited about every day truly is a new experience. So I'm excited about the next article that I might find intriguing. I'm excited about the next conversation that's going to be stimulating. Um, I'm excited about that next um, version of Dune that's opening a few days before Christmas. Um, I'm excited with this pandemic coming to an end or a vaccine coming so that I can travel more. Um, so those are a few of the things that excite me.
Love it. And what do you hope most will change in the world?
As you mentioned earlier, we're not just going through a pandemic, we're going through um, social unrest. And I would hope that this time that all of us have been forced to self isolate, that all of us have been forced to social distance, um, that everyone at whatever level they're at in life is taking this time to look within themselves to say, how can I improve? How can I improve the relationship with my girlfriend, wife, grandmother, aunt, sister, brother, neighbor, cousin, nephew, niece, co-worker, employer, uh, government employee, entrepreneurs? I would hope that everyone looks within and asks themselves where they can improve. And I think if we sincerely ask ourselves, that answer is within, and folks generally know what they need to improve.
Yeah, I love that. Both of these are really important things. I would like to know which one's more important for you right now in this moment, not right here in this room, but just in these days. Is it more important for you to have a platform on which you can speak what you want to say and be heard? Or is it more important for you to create a platform for other people to speak what they want to say and listen? And sometimes it's altruistic to answer the second one. I'm not interested in altruism right now. I'm interested in what you genuinely feel if you have a message that you want to get out there that you really would like people to hear, or if you feel like your message is listening to other people.
I've worn both hats. If it's on a personal level, I don't need to be out in front. I I think that by giving folks an opportunity to share their thoughts, to speak their mind, I find that that's therapeutic for me, um, as well as for them. And it because I believe that there is a ripple effect in this energy in life, that release does not necessarily have to come from me.
Yeah.
That uh, if individuals are willing to share their thoughts, their goals, their dreams, their desires, their ambitions, their fears, that it has a mutual benefit for us both.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm doing through the questions I'm asking is collecting data from people, and one of the data points that I'm interested in, so interested in, is I created this whole show so that people who had would have a chance to express their point of view and be heard. And yet, when I ask that question, a huge majority of people say it's more important for them right now to listen to other people and hear what they have to say,
Ah,
which really intrigues me because I really thought, hey, people don't have a platform to speak. And it intrigues me in another reason because I don't really think that many people do listen to other people very much. So,
unfortunately, yes.
why do you think we don't listen? Why do you think we speak more than we listen? If you do, you think we speak more than we listen? And if you do, why do you think we do?
Yes, it is unfortunate that most folks do speak more than they do listen. In my trainings, I try to stress that we have two ears and one mouth. Therefore, we should listen twice as much as we speak.
Yeah,
I think a lot of folks, sadly, when there is a conversation, as opposed to absorbing potentially new information and processing that information, they're more consumed with what their response is going to be.
Yeah.
versus actually listening to the other person. So I would stress that, and all of us have been guilty of that, because in our core, like, this is my belief, this is my understanding of my life, and so they want to express it and they want to counter different objections and arguments. But it's extremely liberating and healthy to take the time to truly listen, to see a different viewpoint, to see or hear a different perspective, and weigh that to your own viewpoint, your own perspective. If you can identify some similarities, wonderful. If you're unable to identify any similarities, you can always fall back on your core beliefs. But I think most folks are intent on what are they going to say next versus truly listening. And if they could step outside that box and truly listen, if it's the simple reminder of, yes, I do have two ears, so maybe I should try to listen twice as much, if that's helpful for some folks, wonderful. If not, just as an internal exercise, to try to exercise that in their daily experiences.
Can you think of a moment where you wish you would have listened rather than spoken?
Time that I wish I would have listened. I'm sure there's multiple ones, and a lot of times it would have been in my, I guess that's the reason why we pose the question, because it typically is in your favor. And that goes back to you want to express yourself so intently, and you don't want to risk someone, um, leaving yourself open to someone disagreeing with you or to criticize you, that you put up your defenses and you want to lay that line of defense. You want to start building that wall as quickly as possible. Um, so it doesn't immediately pop into my own brain, but I do know experiences from a child or experiences in relationships, um, different opportunities in the business world, that if I had just taken a breath, held it for a little bit, and slowly released it out,
Yeah.
things would have worked out just fine.
I want to just share and be vulnerable so I can crack the egg a little bit so that it's more personal.
Okay.
Um, so I spend 10 hours a day talking to strangers in this room. And my wife was sitting with me the other day, a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago. And she said something to me, and I was just caught in my mind. And I said, yeah, I think that's a great idea. And she looked at me. She said, Danny, hold on, look at me. And I looked at her. She said, you didn't hear a word I said, did you? And I said, I am so sorry. You're right. I just was so caught up in what I was doing. I just answered you without listening. And I am so sorry. Let me put down what I'm doing and let me just listen to what you're saying. And I think that for me, at least, it happens so often that it's so important to me. That's why it's so important to me to create this revolution of listening, because it's really a revolution of listening for myself, that I really want to learn how to do this better and be here with people and just hear what they're saying. Do you
Okay,
think that's
Daniel.
true? Huh?
All right. Late February, I mentioned to you earlier, I was touring throughout Asia, right?
Yes.
So late February, I spent 30 days. I went to Cambodia and Vietnam and Burma and the Philippines, Thailand. So I was spending my last few weeks in Thailand. I was looking at some properties and what have you. I made a deposit on a piece of property overlooking the ocean. And the first week of February, I already had my return ticket back to the States. And I called up one of my best friends in Nevada, said, I'll be heading out soon, but I love this place. I put a deposit on some property. I'm going to come back for a couple of weeks, tie up some loose ends, sell a property, put some things in storage, visit some friends and family for 2 weeks, and then I want to come back and enjoy this property overlooking the ocean. And he said, if you want, you could just overnight your keys, call a moving company, give me a power of attorney to deal with the broker to sell your property, and you can just stay there. I said, oh,
Wow.
don't be ridiculous. It's just 2 weeks.
Right.
But for a moment, I thought, well, maybe I could do that. But I thought, well, it's not the end of the world. How little did I know, right?
Right. Right.
But I thought,
Right.
it's only 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks, I'll be right back, and I'll be able to enjoy my property overlooking the ocean. And so if I had just taken a moment and let that sink in, then I would probably be speaking to you from my property overlooking the Gulf of Thailand,
Love it.
um, in a different state of mind, if you will.
I look forward to having the conversation from that property another time soon.
All right, so be it.
But I want everybody. Did you notice a shift that just happened in you when I opened up and told you my story?
Yes, yes,
And I want listeners, like, look, Patrick is an incredibly open, generous, good man who spends his life involved in his own self development and development of other people. And yet, did you feel the shift that went from teacher to personal? And he wasn't meaning to be teaching, but teaching's so much a part of his life that he speaks in terms of when we do this or when you do this or when. But when, as soon as I told a personal story, it gave Patrick the okay to say, okay, wait, and okay, Daniel, I got, wait right here, I got one, right, and he was willing to share a personal story because it was okay now to share a personal story. When in your life can you model for somebody that which you want them to have, rather than just asking them to do it and you remaining not vulnerable? It was really beautiful, and I love that shift that happened, and I really admire you for being able to do it, because it was clearly a shift that happened for us.
wonderful.
Do you believe people are more the same than they are different, or more different than they are the same?
Definitely more the same, Daniel. Um, whether we're a cat lover or a dog lover, we love some type of pet. Could be a gerbil, could be a snake, could be a could be a, as I mentioned, a dragonfly or a pet rock. But we're the same, that we want to love something or someone. We're the same that we want to do something, whether it's uh, a hobby or a business or some type of pursuit. And we're the same because we all want to hope for something, hope for a better life for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, for our communities, for our country, for our world. So my response would be that we have more in common, with folks throughout the world than we have less in common.
I Again, when the data that I'm accruing, most people say that, and so it lobs over the net for me, which I'd like to lob over the net to you. If we feel that we are more similar than we are different, why do we spend so much time focusing on the differences that we have? Any
Yes,
ideas?
no, it's quite unfortunate. It's I would say a part of that is just human nature. Oftentimes, if I'm giving a talk, I'll have a whiteboard and I'll write 2 plus 2 is 5. 3 plus 3 is 6, and 4 plus 3 is 7, and 8 plus 2 is 10. And even though 3 of my answers were correct, they'll look at the first one that was incorrect, and they'll put all their focus on what was incorrect and totally ignore 75% that was correct.
Love that. Why do you think people do that?
Some, at a certain level, some folks, it comes from their ego, that they want to prove to themselves and to others that they know something, that they can spot a mistake faster than someone else, or they can spot a mistake or a scenario that they themselves certainly would not do them on their own level of experiences in life. So from that perspective, it's ingrained that if you're a little child in the classroom, look a little Johnny, a little Susie, she wore mismatched socks today, or mismatched shoes today because she got dressed or he got dressed in the dark, or someone's little Johnny or little Mary forgot their lunch, or little John and little Mary, they didn't receive an allowance or lunch money. So I think there's a part of the human experience that wants to point to someone and say, oh, look, um, I'm not like that. I would not fall for that. That would not be my experience. I think that's a certain part of the human experience that um, wants to point out to others that they would not have made the same mistake.
I love that. I remember when I was in seminary, my teacher took me into a beautiful room, and he said, "I want you to find 10 things wrong with this room in 30 seconds. Go." And I said,
Uh,
30 seconds? He said, yeah, 30 seconds. And he left and came back 30 seconds later, which was no time at all. He said, did you do it? I said, I have 9. He said, tell me what they are, and I want you to find the 10th before we talk. And I said to him, why are you doing this? This room is beautiful. It's perfect. No one would see any of these things. They're small, insignificant little nothings that don't matter. He said, you can't make the world beautiful if you don't know where it's ugly. And I said, but it's not ugly. And to this day, I remember that exercise that happened 40 years ago.
wow.
And I think that doggone son of a gun has sort of ruined a portion of my life, because I walk into situations and I can immediately see what's wrong in a situation. Well, that's great when I go into a business, because that's what they pay me for. They'd
Yes.
like me to be able to quickly assert what's wrong and how do we fix it. But it's
Uh-huh.
not great when we walk into a relationship. It's not great
No.
when we walk into a religious community. It's
Yes.
not great when when we walk into life itself.
Yes.
If you had 2 minutes to say what you wanted to say to the world, what would you say?
That we're all in this journey together. It was once shared with me that all of us are astronauts in this spaceship we call Earth. It's an organic spaceship, and we're whirling through space. So I would tell my fellow astronauts that we're in this together, and the only way we're going to make it out of this together is by getting along, um, both as individuals, getting along within ourselves, getting along in relationships. And of course, I must define that. In order to help someone else, you must first help yourself, right? You must seek to improve and enlighten yourself. So that ripple effect, or that 200 monkey effect, if we can all simply strive to improve ourselves on a daily basis, it will have a ripple effect in our relationships, our families, our neighborhoods, our cities, our states, our countries. And as a race, a human race on Earth, we will evolve. We will continue to evolve. And so I would hope that at just this level, if conversations like we're having now, if books that are being read, or articles that are being read, or uh, posts that are being observed, or movies, or just experiences in life can cause each of us as individuals to seek to improve ourselves on all levels, not just on a materialistic level, to seek to improve ourselves on a daily basis, I think it will have a ripple effect for society as a whole. And so, if I would leave anything with your listeners, is to have them look within, and on a daily basis, we're not all perfect. If it happens twice a week, or three times a week, or once a week, to look within ourselves and say, what could I do better? What conversations could I have better? What to do lists could I simplify? What part of my life that I've been procrastinating could I take a step back and ask myself, can I go under it? Can I go over it? Can I go around it? Can I go through it? Do I know someone in my life that can remove this obstacle from my experience? So in a nutshell, that's what I would leave with
I
your
love it.
audience, Daniel.
Patrick, thank you for everything you've shared with us, and thank you for sharing your time. It's been a true honor to get to know you a little bit, to meet you. You came in as a stranger, and I think it's fair to say you're going out as my friend.
Uh,
I would love to have more conversation with you. I completely enjoyed the conversation we had. And I want to just thank you for taking your time to share yourself with me and the people who listen to the show. For those who do listen to the show, I want to thank you for listening to the show, for being here. And I want to ask you to do, if you like what you hear, share it with people you like. The way something grows is we like something and we tell the people we like that we like something. And don't be shy. Share it with them. They can like it or don't like it. If you're shy and you don't want to do it, that's okay too. But the way something grows is when we share what we like with others, because there's plenty of this and more to go around. And I want to invite all of you who are listening to the challenge that I give at the end of every show, which is, why not take 10 minutes out of the course of your life and go up to someone you don't know and just ask them how they're doing, with no desire to fix them, change them, help them, uh, convert them, educate them, lead them, or anything. Just for the sheer joy of having the pleasure of knowing them, hearing what they say, hearing how they are, and giving them love and acceptance and being there for them, to just say, with me, brother, sister, you can tell me how you're really doing, and I'm more than happy to listen. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you guys for always tuning into the show and for sharing the show with people. Patrick, before we walk out, is there anything else you want to say?
Thanks for having me, Daniel. It's sincerely, it's been a pleasure crossing paths with you. And when this pandemic is over, you're certainly welcome to continue this conversation either in person or through this digital medium when I'm overlooking the Gulf of Thailand.
I look forward to it, my friend. Okay,
Okay.
until the next conversation, friends, go out and make the world a friendlier place. When people are strangers, the world's a strange place. But when you're friends with people, the world's a friendly place. Why not take a strange world and make it a friendly world by just making strangers into friends, by simply engaging them in a conversation and sitting with them and just listening to what they have to say? Until the next stranger comes into the room, be kind to each other, love each other, take care of each other, be safe, be honest, be real, and be friends. Thanks for being here. Until next time, ciao.